Are you the parent of a school-aged athlete? Well, if you are, this video is for you. My name's Dr. Ashley. I'm a physical therapist, and I'm here today to give you 5 tips to help your school-aged athlete stay healthy. Keeping young athletes healthy sometimes feels like rocket science. Although they're going to practice, you have them doing extra training sessions, their performance continues to decline. Well, it's not always about the extra that they need to do, and sometimes we need to be looking at outside variables that are actually going to make the difference. So as I already stated, my goal for today's conversation is to give you 5 tips to help keep your school-aged athlete healthy, and over time, making sure that you're recognizing signs of certain things if their performance does start to decline. However, before I do that, if you wouldn't mind, hit that subscribe button, and if you're enjoying our content, share our channel with your friends. Are you ready for this? Well, tip number 1 to help keep your school-aged athlete healthy is paying attention to their nutrition. The reason being is this is often an area that is overlooked by parents. They just assume their child's going to school, they're eating their food, they're drinking the water, they're drinking milk, whatever it is that you're assuming they're doing, more than likely they aren't. Unfortunately, what we often see in school-aged athletes is they are not consuming enough. They're not consuming enough food, they're not consuming enough fluids throughout the day to keep themselves prepared for what they're going to be putting themselves through at the end of every day. That could be a 2-hour-long soccer practice, that could be track meets, that could be baseball practice, or swimming. It really doesn't matter. And unfortunately, when we see that athletes don't eat enough, it certainly does cause a performance decline. Well, I'm not a dietitian. I'm not going to go over what they should be eating, protein, carbohydrate, fat-wise. However, just to give you a little bit of an idea, when we're looking at, say, a growing athlete, for females, they should be consuming at a minimum of 2,200 calories a day for some of them. And then for men, we're really looking over sometimes that 3,000, right, calorie mark. Think about that as you send your athletes into school. And if you're noticing that they're struggling in the nutrition category, don't hesitate to reach out to your local dietitian for help. Tip number 2 is all about getting your children strength training. The reason being, research shows that strength training is extremely beneficial for young athletes, not only for bone health, but also for injury prevention over time. Remember, when an athlete is performing, their muscles are using their energy, right? And what we can do by strength is making sure that, number 1, your athlete becomes stronger, but number 2, their muscles can endure more over time. The other thing is that strength training also helps implement new movement patterns into your athletes' repertoire of things that they do. And when it comes to exercise, variability is key when it comes to keeping athletes healthy. Now, we do recommend, if you are to implement a strength program into your child's routine, make sure that they are being assisted by somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody who is well versed in strength training a young athlete. The reason being is we want to make sure young athletes learn the right way. We want to learn movement patterns, squats, hip hinges, lunges, pushes, pulls. Those are all extremely important when it comes to helping athletes improve their game. The other thing is that when we're in season, right? When young athletes are in season, we're really looking for maintenance work. We're looking for maybe 1 to 2 times a week of basic strength training. Out of season, we're really looking to help athletes build that base, and they're going to be working on 3 to 4 times a week of strength work. Yeah, think about that. How many of you have implemented strengthening into your child's program? My guess is not many. All right, I should give some of you credit. I'm sure that you have your child's strength training. However, maybe it's not as much or as heavy as it needs to be. Well, I'm about to go into tip number 3, and this somewhat goes back to strength training and variability of activity that your child does. What we're looking at for tip number 3 is changing the things that your child does on a regular basis in regards to movement. So whether that is they're a runner and we need to get them doing something like playing flag football, or if they're a soccer player and we need to get them doing strength training, these things all count as exercise variability. The other thing that I also kind of put into this category is rest. Remember when we used to have off seasons? Remember when there used to be a 4-season approach to things? We really need to make sure that our children get time off in between their respective sports or in between their respective seasons. Why? That helps the body recover, and it also helps children perform to the best of their abilities. Now, I'm gonna go into a little bit of a tangent about changing up the exercises that your child does or the sports that your child does. The reason being is that for things such as off-loaded sports, swimming, cycling, and believe it or not, even running becomes into this category because of how predictable the movements are, right? You're doing the same repetitive step over and over again without much variation. Well, when it comes to athletes who do the same thing over and over again, especially in their younger ages, what we found is that over time, they're not going to develop strong bones as their counterparts who are playing multi-directional or field sports. That's just what research says. And a lot of the time that will have to do just with the way that muscles are pulling on bones and also just the way that they're moving their bodies. Now, variability is key. Sometimes what I recommend is that for coaches, make sure that if you're a running coach or a swimming coach, you're doing alternative activities. You're having them play a field game, catch, tag, something like that on a regular basis. If you're a parent who's struggling to get their athlete to do things outside of the box, take them on a hike, implement some strength training, as I've already said, or do things like setting up an obstacle course in the backyard. It really is simply about just having them move in different ways, having them jump, having them kind of even just do rolls on the ground. I love, even if you're not a soccer athlete, something called the FIFA 11 because it implements a lot of different moves into a child's warm-up routine or into their activity to make sure that they're getting the variability they need. Oh, and don't forget to make sure that you're giving your child rest in between their seasons, as I've already mentioned just before. All right, so I have already tackled nutrition, strength training, exercise variability, and rest. Next up, and tip number 4, has to do with finding alternative hobbies for your child to participate in or to do. The reason I bring this up is a lot of athletes become over-invested in their one sport or sports in general, and they lack outside interests or outside hobbies for that just in case moment that they're not able to participate in their athletic endeavor. The big thing here is when athletes start to have something that happens, right? It takes them away from their sport, whether it be an injury, life circumstances. Sometimes they go through what we call an identity crisis. Because they've never had anything else, they don't necessarily know what to do. There's no other hobbies, there's no other activities that they've ever done, and they find themselves yearning just to be playing. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously this is going to happen with any athlete. However, if they have other hobbies, even if it's video games, reading, writing, cooking, sometimes they will be able to kind of come out of that little bit of a downturn mentally that they've had and progress a little bit quicker in their recovery. Now, alternative hobbies are simply there for mental health purposes. And remember that mental health is extremely important when it comes to sports and the psychology of sports. The reason being is if an athlete doesn't necessarily feel well about who they are, if they're not succeeding in that one thing that they want to succeed in, well, maybe help them find something else to succeed in. So let's just remember, don't always focus on that one thing that your athlete wants to focus on. Try to push them outside of the box, try to get them doing different things and find them something else to do when they need it.